Okay, here's another brief little video to help you prepare for your individual research proposal. So it might look something sort of like this. Not exactly, and yours would probably more likely be fancier and have more detail. But you start off obviously with some title and your name, pretty straightforward, and then you want to have a slide that provides the background for your study. So this study is looking at the effects of peer rejection via social media on self-esteem. So, and you can title the slide whatever you want. You even title it Introduction if you want. But at this point, I would be talking about some of my key variables. So I'll talk about the importance of the study by identifying citing some studies about the increased use of social media. I might cite some statistics while talking about that, and then also talk about potential harmful effects of social media. I might cite some of the research on bullying, online bullying here, to kind of tell the reader that this is an important thing. And then I'll briefly review the research on the impact of peer rejection. So what do we know about when people reject other people? And there's a lot of research on that, so I'm not going to go all of it, but I'll kind of hit the highlights. Here are the things that happens, and probably one of the things I'll find will be that it negatively affects self-esteem, among other variables. And I'll just briefly summarize those. Then I'll talk a little bit about what affects self-esteem, including peer rejection, and then also other behaviors that I might link into my study. And then I'll talk about the relationship between online behavior and self-concept. All right, so there's some research on that about who you are online and how that relates to how you see yourself, and how those online experiences impact how you see yourself, which is related to self-esteem. So I'm kind of reviewing the existing literature and setting the stage for my study. And one of the key things is not to put everything that you're going to say on the screen, right? You don't want to just read to the audience what's there, because they can read it themselves. So you just put the bullets, the highlights, and you've got probably a script in front of you with details that you're reading if you haven't memorized everything. So I'm going to do that, set the stage, and I'll say, okay, here's what we know about these variables. And we don't know, however, we don't know this. I'm going to talk about that gap. So here's my hypothesis. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm predicting that peer rejection leads to a decrease in self-esteem, which is already demonstrated. But I'm going to say this negative impact will be greater when the rejection occurs via social media than when it occurs face-to-face. And I'll talk about my justification for that, my rationale, and I'll, pull from different aspects of research. Probably some of the stuff that I just talked about on the previous page, but here clearly talking about why I expect the pattern that I'm looking to find. So I'll provide information on the rationale, and then I'll talk about the method. So I'll say, okay, what type of design this is. It's a between subject experimental design. I'll talk about the participants, how many there will be, how I'm going to recruit them, the demographics of either the population I'll be sampling from, or if I'm looking for a certain type of people. If I want 50% white and 50% Hispanic, then I'll say that. And also the age range that either I want to get or of the population I'll be sampling from. And then I'll talk about the materials that I might be using, including probably the measure I would use to measure self-esteem. And then talk a little bit about the procedure, how I would manipulate peer rejection. And I'll probably use a confederate, right? Have them come in and have this sham study. I think they're doing one thing, and they're working with somebody on this project, right? But really, that person they're working with is a confederate. And then the confederate will invite them to do something. There will be an opportunity for the confederate to invite them to do something or not, right? Acceptance or rejection. So I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about how I'll measure, how I operationalize self-esteem, and when participants will fill out those measures and all that type of stuff. So again, you don't put all the details on the screen, just the highlights to remind you of what to talk about and kind of let the reader know where you're going. And obviously I don't have any animations in here, but if you want animations, that's fine. After doing that, talk about your data analyses. I would use an ANOVA to look at this, right? So I've got two variables, one the context and the other peer behavior. So it's a 2x2 ANOVA, and I have kind of an expected pattern of results, just kind of making up some numbers to give the reader an idea. And I would say, these aren't the exact numbers I would expect, but to give you an idea that I expect when looking at this table, self-esteem being higher for acceptance than rejection. You see that by the 10 and the 9 being greater than the 2 or the 6. So people are always feeling better when they're accepted than when they're rejected. However, the discrepancy between acceptance and rejection will be larger in the context of social media, where 10 is much farther from 2 than 9 is from 6 in the face-to-face. Right? So here I've talked about my expected pattern of results. And then I want to talk about the limitations to the study. Right? And usually you can break it down into threats to internal validity and threats to external validity. You won't have question marks in yours, but I'm not going to give you... I want you to come up with these yourself, so I'm not going to tell you what to put here. But identify a couple of things. So expect to find this, but there are these things that the way I've designed the study, it's not perfect, and so I could be wrong, and I could be wrong because of this, or this, related to either. I might conclude that there's an effect when there really isn't because of this, and then external validity. The effect might be true for these particular people in this particular setting, but it might not be true for other people, or as the setting changes to varying degrees. Okay, and then after you've addressed the limitations of the study, you're going to go ahead and address the potential implications or applications. So some examples here for this study. I might talk about how if I found that in fact peer rejection via social media, on Facebook or whatever, unfriending somebody, has a bigger negative impact on self-esteem, then that might be important to know in terms of designing bullying prevention programs, especially related to online bullying and ways to combat that. It might also be implications for counseling via the internet and clients' perceptions of rejection on the part of the therapist, and how that might be even more dangerous, more harmful in an online setting than in a face-to-face setting, and so you want to be maybe extra cautious about those things. And then if I can think of anything else, and then last thing I usually want to talk about is future research. So assuming that I found what I think I'm going to find, the next thing you need to do is this. So what would be the logical next step? Okay, and that's about all you need to include in your presentation. Okay, let me know if you have any questions.